This video is to react to the Lucas Browne versus Dillian Whyte weigh-in today. Quite an interesting weigh-in for me. As I always say when I do these videos, sometimes when you watch these kind of weigh-ins, you don't learn anything from them. Sometimes you can see them and you can really get an indication as to how the fight will play out. Lucas Browne has weighed in at 18 stone 11. Dillian Whyte has weighed in at 18 stone 2. Now these are two very, very big men. They've both weighed in quite heavy indeed for this. And looking at them on the scales, both of them, well, we've seen both of them considerably leaner in the past. Now this is no real surprise from a Lucas Browne perspective. I've covered several times in the lead up to this fight how heavy I believed Lucas Browne was going to be. But this is something of a surprise from a Dillian Whyte perspective. I certainly wasn't anticipating Whyte to come in quite so heavy for this fight. To give you a clear example as to why, I mean, shout out to my man Alex here who sent me these weights. He was 17 stone 9 against Helenius, 17 stone 8 for Chisora, and 17 stone 7 against David Allen. So let's cast our minds back to that slightly sluggish, slightly disappointing performance against Robert Helenius. While Dillian Whyte is actually half a stone heavier than when he fought Helenius for this current fight with Lucas Browne. Now, Dillian Whyte, we believe, has been training very hard and had a relatively good preparation for this camp, for this fight even. So one would presume that most likely this is a tactic. They've seen Lucas Browne, they know Lucas Browne is a very, very, very big man. They probably had a look at Lucas Browne in the lead up to the fight when they were doing the initial press conference and they were doing the gloves are off, and they probably deduced that Lucas Browne was going to come in very heavy, and they maybe have made a conscious decision that they didn't want Dillian Whyte being so much lighter than Lucas Browne. Maybe they thought that Dillian coming in just a little bit heavier would give him more power. Maybe they thought that Dillian coming in just a little bit heavier would give him more durability against Lucas Browne and his much discussed power. I don't know. For me, from a Dillian Whyte perspective, at this stage, I'm not a fan of this. Now, it's easy to be an expert in hindsight, and it may prove to be a brilliant tactic. So, yeah, maybe we'll be discussing brilliant tactics from the Whyte camp after the fight on Saturday. But at this early stage, my take is that I personally wouldn't want to see Dillian Whyte come in this heavy. You know, I actually looked at Dillian Whyte in that Helenius fight and thought he could do with losing a few pounds. You know, if he was 17 stone 9 in that fight, I'd have probably liked to have seen him near 17 stone. I appreciate Dillian Whyte's a big man. He's not one of these heavyweights who's going to be coming in 15 stone like Deontay Wilder. But I actually thought there was scope for Dillian to lose a little bit more weight. And I wondered whether that may mean he was a bit faster. You know, a bit better footwork, a bit more snap in his punches, a bit more combinations. I thought that would be a real pro to Dillian. You know, in my pre-fight build-up, I talked about the fact that I suspected Dillian Whyte would be the higher output fighter, and after a cagey beginning, perhaps Dillian Whyte would, you know, take over in the middle rounds and start to become higher output and become more active. I'm not completely abandoning that, because I believe even carrying a bit of weight, Dillian Whyte is still someone who naturally has decent stamina and decent engine. But let me say I am slightly less confident in that prediction now, having seen the shape of Dillian Whyte today. You know, I was worried that Lucas Browne, it was just going to be too slow and plodding in there. And I thought it might be easy work for Dillian just to use his movement, just to get his jab going and be the more active fighter. But now there's actually far less of a weight gap between the two of them. And I wonder if Dillian Whyte coming in so heavy will have potentially negated some of the advantages that I thought he'd have coming into this fight. Conversely, Lucas Browne's also weighed in heavy at 18 stone 11. Being frank, I thought there was scope he may have been a little bit heavier than that. 18 stone 11 is a massive, massive man. I'm not calling it, I'm not calling that light whatsoever. For people tuning in from the US, you know, that's over 260 pounds, 262, 263, probably something like that. He's a big, 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 heavy guy. But looking at the shape of him in the lead up to this fight, I actually thought he may be, you know, 5, 10, 15 pounds heavier than that. So, to be fair, Lucas Browne has, you know, done a good job of getting rid of some of that excess weight. Now, 18 stone 11 is still far too heavy to be ideal. I'm reliably informed that when Lucas Browne fought Ruslan Chagayev, let me just pull up, just having a look, my man Chris has sent me this, that when he fought Chagayev, he was 17 stone 8. So he is some, what's that, 17 pounds heavier than when he put in that career peak performance against Chagayev. So, you know, Lucas Browne himself is in, you know, he's much heavier than I like. But it could have been worse for Lucas Browne, actually. And seeing the condition he was in the build-up, I am actually pleasantly surprised. There's a far smaller gap between these two than I suspected. I thought Dillian Whyte would be in the low 17 stones and Lucas Browne could easily be up in the 19 stones. You know, I thought we'd be looking at a 25, 30 pound difference between these two guys. But not for the first time on this channel. I'm badly wrong. And we've got a 9 pound difference between these guys. The conditions of both men could still be significant because, as I've said previously, I believe even though Dillian carries a bit of weight, he's still able to fight at a high pace and fight, you know, with decent output at that weight. Whereas I do believe when Lucas Browne weighs in heavy, he becomes very sluggish, very ponderous, and a lot more low output. So it could still be very, very, you know, it could still be very relevant, but there is less of a gap than I would have thought. Lastly, what I'll say is when both men stood facing each other at the final face-off, Lucas Browne was clearly a bigger man. You know, he's obviously a taller man. He's obviously, well, I know Dillian Whyte supposedly has bigger reach, but you know, looking at the two of them, Lucas Browne looks like the taller man, the scopier man, possibly the slightly bigger framed man. And with that difference, the fact that there was only 9 pounds in it, and with the fact that Lucas Browne is so, you know, is noticeably taller, I actually thought the shape between the two men was quite comparable. You know, I didn't think that Dillian Whyte was in noticeably better shape than Lucas Browne. And for me, that was a real surprise. A real surprise. I thought there was going to be a considerable distance. I thought we'd see Lucas looking, well, putting it frankly, looking fatter. And I thought we'd see Dillian Whyte looking leaner. So, for me, quite a telling weigh-in. Does it make me want to change my prediction? It doesn't. The prediction's up on the channel. I stand by the prediction. But it definitely makes me less confident in it. I'm less confident in my prediction today than I was yesterday. Overall, my honest feeling is that Dillian Whyte is a guy who can fight carrying a bit of extra weight, whereas Lucas Browne is someone whose performances immediately decrease and decline if he's carrying a bit of extra weight. So overall, I'd rather be with Dillian Whyte still than Lucas Browne, but it is less confident. And, you know, if Dillian Whyte is coming in heavy, that maybe, you know, that maybe does imply that he's there to trade lever and try and get his power punches off, and that he's prepared to take punches from Lucas Browne. What I would have liked to have seen from Dillian Whyte, from a pure tactical perspective, I appreciate this may not make the best spectacle for the fans, but from a Dillian Whyte perspective, I wanted to see him move. I wanted to see him jab. I wanted to see him use distance. I wanted to see him be cagey, wear out Lucas Browne, and then pick away with him. You know, for me, tactically, I wonder if Dillian Whyte is coming into this fight, you know, looking at adopting that approach, given the weight that he's come in at. You know, possibly not. If he'd come in at 17 stone and been so much lighter than Lucas Browne, you'd feel he'd have a real advantage in the later rounds with how he can move and, you know, how he can be evasive and how he can get into range, get out of range, etc. Look, Dillian's still 9 pounds lighter. He's still a decade younger. He's still far more active. I'm not saying that the advantages in this fight aren't with Dillian Whyte. He's the home fighter as well. But I found this a surprising weigh-in. I expected a heavier Browne and a lighter Dillian Whyte. And it may suggest that this fight will play out differently to what I predicted. On balance, I'm going to stick with my prediction. But as you can probably tell as I'm mulling this over, talking to you guys, going around in circles, it's kind of given me a pause for thought for a second. Recording this Friday evening. Obviously tomorrow's fight day, so very much looking forward to that. I'll be putting up some sort of coverage. Obviously there'll be a post-fight reaction video. Maybe we'll have a video during the day, or, you know, we'll probably discuss the undercard in some sort of fashion. So looking forward to that. Please hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, so you can check out all the coverage tomorrow. My only other request, please hit the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed this video. That means that it will get more coverage, and more people will be able to tune in and see what we're doing here. Other than that, let me say happy weekend to everyone. Hope you enjoy yourselves. Thanks for tuning into the channel. As always, appreciate you taking the time to check out what I'm doing over here. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.